Hello, and welcome back to Tree of Statism, Good and Evil. This week we're going to be talking about empires and vassal states. Now, do you think your state is an empire or a vassal state? Either way, this video is going to be important for you to understand your country's foreign policy. The first thing we want to say is that alliances between the strong and the weak are not amongst equals. The weak depend on the strong far more. The relationship is not equal in both directions. This means that the empires set the tone for the vassal states, for a very simple reason. The empire can walk away from the relationship. The vassal state is going to be screwed if the empire walks away. The weaker the vassal, the more enemies it has, but also the more it is dependent on the empire. This means that while it needs more protection, it can also be extorted for more resources. The Kurdish model is a great example. The American Empire has only a few thousand troops in northern Syria, in a free province named Rojava. Some people also call it Kurdistan. The troops there give them air defense, give them artillery support, they train the troops. However, the big bulk of the manpower are locals. That means tens of thousands of local Kurds fighting in the army, fighting in the police, doing most of the groundwork, and doing most of the dying. This means that the American troops only do a very small fraction of the work. However, this is the very important fraction of the work that the Kurds absolutely rely on the Americans in their relationship. But what is the price for American aid? They demand women's rights and gay liberation. No, I'm just kidding. It's about the oil, it's about the gas, it's about whatever natural resources can be sold. And if they are sold through American companies, then America makes a large profit. If America is given even a fraction of the oil, let's say 10%, 15%, that's going to be a lot of money, and it's going to be very, very worthwhile for the American elites who get to enjoy that money. If the alliance fails, or if the Americans decide to leave, there are very little consequences for the Americans except for a lost revenue source. If the alliance fails, then for the Kurds it's going to be absolutely disastrous. They will not be able to resist the Syrian government, and as ethnic minorities, they might be slaughtered or might find themselves expelled. The power imbalance is very, very one sided. And that means that the Americans can extort oil or whatever else they have in exchange for their aid. To contrast this, we want to compare it with the Israeli model. Israel is a bit more independent. It has a reasonably strong army, it has good tech capabilities. It does not need American troops on the ground. They do, however, need an industrial base that America has. In times of war, Israel needs a logistical support line. This means Israel is pressurable, but not as easy to pressure as the Kurds. This means they can offer more, however, it is harder to extort them for anything you need from them. The relationship with Israel started off a bit odd. Israel and America were not allied at first. At first, America was allied with the oil producing Arab states, and Israel was armed by the British, but mostly the French, until 1967. Then America shifted its stance towards Israel. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, and we may never get official documents. However, a theory can be offered. At the time, there was a big bad state in the Middle East called Egypt. Egypt might have overtaken the entire Middle East and unified it under their boot, if not for a pesky little state called Israel. It was the only country in the region that could really stand up to it, and stand up to it is a bit of a stretch because it was more fend Egypt off. It was not going to do too much because it was too small to fully fight Egypt in depth. They did manage to take a bunch of mostly empty territory in the Sinai, but this is kind of not exactly Egyptian heartland that was lost. The theory is, however, that after Egypt was defeated in the third time, in 1967, America just saw Israel as a sword in the Middle East that it could hold against Egypt. The point was not to defend Israel, but to defend the oil producing states. Israel was a sword, not the objective. This way, you would not need to send troops on the ground to defend the oil states, and you would not be seen as Americans invading, you would just be seen as Americans sending ammunition to a small state named Israel. That, however, brings us to the next rule. Vassal states do not fight each other. Uh, After the 1973 war, when Israel defeated Egypt for the fourth time in a very much a Pyrrhic victory, uh, Egypt switched sides. It no longer was backed by the USSR and started having relations with the other empire, the United States. More than Israel or Egypt won the war, we can say that America won the war as an empire because it gained one of the major vassal states it could have in the Middle East. It was no longer a big problem for them, it was now a big tool for them. Uh, and then a few years later, a peace deal was signed between Israel and Egypt because vassal states are not allowed to fight each other. They can have peace, they can be at a long ceasefire that is just constantly extended. I can have a temporary ceasefire with you that lasts 100 years. It's just extended a few more years each time, or we just don't start another round of fighting. However, the empire will not let vassal states fight each other for very particular reasons. They're supposed to help the empire, not screw each other over. That's not what the empire wants, and the empire is going to dictate terms. However, when the empire backs two warring states that now become vassal states that have to play along, it gives the empire more place to extort them. It can keep them at peace by supporting the defender should one attack the other. It can also invite the enemy to join them in a campaign against any rebelling vassal state. If one state rebels, the empire does not need to send a large attack army to defeat them. They need to send a bit of troops backed by their enemy vassal state. This way they overpower the rebelling vassal state, and it kind of helps them extort the vassal states in both directions. Because more than vassal states rebelling, vassal states will comply because they know how screwed they can be very, very quickly. Can a vassal state play two empires against each other? In theory, yes. If it is independent enough, it can demand things because it can switch sides and turn the tide of the war. The smaller the vassal state, the less likely it is to be able to play two empires against each other. This is why empires like to split up their vassal states into smaller vassal states. They want to use divide and conquer to be able to divide their vassal states to make them smaller and weaker and more extortable. The optimal result is a state that is small enough to control and large enough to send aid, that is divided enough that they can't unite, but also don't hate each other, making war amongst the vassal states inevitable. You don't want some of the vassal states switching side to the other empire. Empires might also support the rebellion. They are likely to support either the government or the rivals, depending on loyalty. This is not really related to any kind of moralistic propaganda. Try to avoid the debates about communism and democracy, women's rights, Islam, whatever it is, it's mostly nonsense. What matters is who has control of the oil. No matter who wins the civil war, the new government will be extorted by the empire that supported them. Imagine the Cold War, when America supported one side and the rebels and the USSR supported the other side. Then it doesn't matter if the Americans support the government or the rebels, it doesn't matter if the USSR supports the government or the rebels. Whoever wins becomes the new government and has to pay back their supporting empire. The Civil War will also weaken the state, making it more extortable. Think about it for a moment. When have you heard of a civil war that did not end with massive death, massive destruction, and a massive economic downturn? Any state that goes through a civil war is going to become weaker because it's going to become economically weaker because it's going to lose a lot of its fighting age men, which are also its working age men. If states refuse to bow down to the empire and they are not stable enough, then they will be toppled again because these new rebels will give up whatever percentage of the oil or of the gas or of the iron or of whatever you need to gain the empire's support and thus gain the governmental jobs they want. These relations make demographic instability significantly worse. In the past, nations could unite. Think of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom used to be England, and they were at war most of their history with the Scots. Well, most of their history is a bit of an exaggeration. Most of their history, they were not united with the Scots in one state. They conquered the Scots rebelled, they conquered the Scots rebelled again. Eventually, the Scots joined them in a union through agreement. Two nations became one. The Welsh were also indoctrinated over time. Not indoctrinated, more assimilated over time. Multiple nations could unite and become one. This seems a bit odd to you when you look from our side of history, but imagine if all of Europe became one state. Imagine if the Eurozone became a government over all this area. Suddenly, a bunch of states that had had a lot of wars in the past, the Germans against the French against the Italians, the Germans against the Poles. Let's not even get into the Baltics and into the southern eastern side of Europe. Bunch of states that hate each other and have a long history of warfare could unite. This is what it kind of was for them. This whole unification thing is a very big thing and a very big powerful thing, and we're going to have videos about, or at least one video about demographic instability. However, that is the natural process for states to unite. When empires are involved, the demographic instability is not a bug in the system, it is a control mechanism. By using the demographic instability, you can turn one subnation against one subnation, thus causing ethnic tensions. You can have a revolution. And again, more than it is about the Houthis or the Tutsis, more than it is about the Sunnis and the Shiites, the Protestants and the Catholics, more than any kind of East versus West or secular versus ultra religious. It's about the guys with the oil and the guys without the oil. And the question is, who's going to be supporting the empire? Any kind of morality is going to be secondary because resources are the main goal. They are what matter. And the nation is going to be disregarded. It's a vassal state. All this being said, do you think your country is an empire or a vassal state? If you think your country is an empire, who do you think your puppet states are? If you think your country is a vassal state, who do you think your masters are? Comment below and tell us. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, and maybe we can all learn. If you like this video, please comment, upvote, and subscribe. If you want to help further, go and watch my other videos. And if you like them as well, do the same over there. Also, please share this video and any other video you might think people might take interest in. If you want to support me further, you can buy my book on Amazon, Ancapistan by Noah Goodman. Thank you for watching, and good night.